And greetings, kings and queens. Happy Sunday, everyone. And welcome back to the Always a Queen, the Metamorphosis platform for another Sunday afternoon live broadcast. Today, we are doing part 3 of the holiday series. In case there is anyone watching or listening who has no idea what the holiday series is about, the holiday series, as I have chosen to call it, is a series of 4 broadcasts that are all related to the holiday season, which is upon us right now. We are literally just around the corner from the holidays, from Christmas and the New Year season and all of the things that are connected to the holidays. And of course, during the holiday season, we like to be very celebratory and focus on all the happy and the good things, which of course is good. We should be focused on the good and the wonderful positive areas of our lives. But I opted in this holiday series to talk a little bit about those aspects of the holidays that are not so positive and that we do not talk very much about because it's difficult, because it is painful to tackle some of these things, but it is also very important. Um, and so, if there is anybody who has missed the first 2 installments of the holiday series, hello, Mr. Pierre. Thank you very much for joining today. I see you in the chat section. um, uh, if there is anyone who has not been able to catch the first 2 installments of the holiday series, I encourage you to go back and watch them. All of these broadcasts are recorded and are uploaded to the Always a Queen platforms. You can go back and watch these recordings on Facebook, on YouTube, and also on our Twitter page. And so if you missed any of them, don't worry. We've got you covered. You can always go back. The recordings are there and accessible for anyone who wants to rewatch them, download them, share them, whatever it is that you want to do. You are welcome to do that at absolutely no cost to you. So I would take advantage. The first installment of the holiday series was entitled Grieving During the Holidays. And I really covered a lot of what people deal with whenever they are forced to be grieving a loss during this time of year when most people are celebrating. And so you can imagine that that is very difficult for a lot of people. And so the broadcast spoke a lot about that, what that looks like and how to cope with it. The second installment, which I did last week, Sunday, spoke about setting boundaries during the holiday season. Another thing that a lot of people struggle with and that we don't talk very much about, but that is very, very important as well. And today, the third installment is going to be about seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression. Most of the time, you would hear this referred to as seasonal depression. The clinical name is seasonal affective disorder. They are one and the same thing. And so both terms are used interchangeably. It's the same thing. So if you hear me switching from one to the other, saying seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression, it's the exact same condition that I am referring to. So please don't get confused. Okay. So we're going to be talking about seasonal depression today. I have invited a colleague of mine to join me for today's broadcast to speak a little bit about the medical aspects of this condition, I am not a medical doctor. I am a psychologist, two very different things. And there are some medical aspects, some medical components to this particular condition that I wanted to get a doctor's perspective on. And so I did invite a colleague to come on with me. So she is going to be joining me in a little while to talk a little bit about those components of this condition. And I will unpack for you the psychological aspects of it and what that looks like. So let's jump into it and talk a little bit about seasonal depression. So I'm going to start from scratch. I am not going to assume that people just know what this is. So we're going to start from the very bottom and then work our way up. So, what exactly is seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder? What is that? So, seasonal affective disorder is actually a type of clinical depression. It is a form of clinical depression. Let me pause and break that down a little bit. I'm sure I have explained this before, but I'm going to do it again. When I speak about depression in a clinical perspective, I like to qualify that this is not the depression that people often are tossing about on a daily basis just because it's kind of a thing to say. You know, persons use the word depression, I would say almost very loosely, because I think often persons don't fully comprehend the seriousness of clinical depression. And so you would often find people just saying they're depressed because they're a little sad. Because, you know, I had a rough day today, I'm depressed. I watched a movie and my favorite character died, I'm depressed. I went to get some ice cream and they did not have my favorite flavor, I'm depressed. You know, and so it's used very loosely, and I think because we tend to use the term so loosely and so much, I feel like it has to a large extent gotten trivialized over time. And as a result, persons do not fully understand just how serious a condition clinical depression actually is. Now, when I speak about depression as a psychologist, I am referring to clinical depression, meaning that this is not just a momentary situation where you are feeling sad for a little while because the favorite character in your movie died. I am talking about an enduring, lasting condition which may be serious enough that it actually requires that you be medicated because there are chemicals and hormones in your body that are not being produced as they should, perhaps in the amounts that are needed, or perhaps they are just not functioning as they should for one reason or another. So, this is not something to be toyed with. This is not something to be played with. This is a condition that can truly make you very dysfunctional and create a lot of chaos in your life if it goes untreated, right? Now, let me add something else to that. Clinical depression has to be with you for a certain period of time. You also have to have a certain set of symptoms, a certain number of symptoms. The symptoms must be persistent for a certain period of time. Like, there is a criteria that one must meet in order to be diagnosed with clinical depression. So you also cannot just walk into someone's office and just get diagnosed with clinical depression. As with all other conditions, there's a criteria that has to be met in order for somebody to get a diagnosis of clinical depression. With all that being said, seasonal affective disorder, or seasonal depression, as it is sometimes called, is a form of clinical depression. So that is to say that clinical depression can show up in various forms, and this is one of them. Now, why is it that we're speaking specifically about this one today in the holiday series? The reason why we are tackling seasonal depression during the holiday series is because this is a type of depression that is triggered by the change of seasons that occurs at this time of the year specifically. So when I say this time of the year, because I know that somebody might come back and watch this recording months from now. So when I say this time of year, I am referring to the winter season, to the late fall or autumn into the winter season. So right now we are at the 11th of December. So if you're watching this recording at a later date, this is being recorded on December 11, which means that we are at the moment at the end of the fall season and are about to enter the winter season, which I believe officially starts on December 21. And this is the time of year in which seasonal depression is typically a problem for persons who have this condition because it is triggered specifically by the change of the seasons that occur at this time of the year. And so the symptoms of this would include sadness, lack of energy, loss of interest in your usual activities, sleeping too much, um, eating way more than you normally would, which typically would lead to like weight gain and these types of things. And it is typically triggered by the fact that there is a change in the season, which results in less sunlight, shorter days. So there's more dark than there is light. It's also triggered by the change in temperature as well. Obviously, this is more impactful for persons who live in those parts of the world where the temperature drops drastically during the fall and the winter season. It becomes very cold. There is very little access to sunlight. And also, the days are very short. Where I live, for example, in upstate New York, by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, at this time of the year, it's already dark as we speak. It's already dark outside. Like it looks like it's 10 o'clock at night and it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And so when I say shorter days, this is what I refer to. And that has an impact on some people, which results in seasonal depression, right? Um, Now, I usually get a lot of questions about like, how do I know if I have seasonal depression, if it's only impacting me during this time of the year and like the rest of the year I'm fine. Like, how do I end up getting diagnosed with this? And the answer to that is if this becomes a norm for you over a period of 2 or 3 years, like you can absolutely identify a pattern over a 2 or 3 year period where it happens at the same time and with the same group of symptoms, you could absolutely get a diagnosis of seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder. But if it's just like a one off thing, you probably are not going to be able to get an official diagnosis because there is no certainty that it really was the season that created the symptoms. And so we would need to see this recurring at least 2 or 3 times before you could get a diagnosis of seasonal depression. Um, Now, it has happened where people get what we call like the winter blues, that is not full blown seasonal depression. And we call it the winter blues because it mimics seasonal depression, but it's almost like a milder version of seasonal depression. And we refer to it as a milder version because perhaps you don't get the number of symptoms that is required. If, for example, you are required to have a group of at least 5 symptoms in order to get an official diagnosis, and you do not have 5 symptoms, what you have instead are 3 symptoms or only 4, but these are 3 or 4 very persistent symptoms, that could be classified as a mild version of seasonal depression. But because you do not have the criteria to meet the full diagnosis, we would often refer to that as the winter blues, and that impacts a lot of people as well. I would almost go as far as to say it's a little bit normal to feel a little bit like this during the colder months of the year. For a lot of reasons, because many persons are stuck inside for far more than they normally would be, because it gets dark so early, because of the temperature constantly being cold, and so for all those reasons, you would almost consider it normal for people to have. Well, look who just popped in. I caught you taking a drink there. Hi. Okay, everyone. I already told them that you would be popping in to the studio today. Um, so let me just pause and introduce you, although you are not a stranger to the Always a Queen platform. This is Dr. Saran King, a colleague of mine. And as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, she is a medical doctor. And I wanted to have a medical doctor here in the studio with me today to talk about specifically the medical components of this, because as I said earlier, I'm a psychologist, not a medical professional. And so I need to make sure that I qualify that, because I know that there are some people who think, well, a doctor is a doctor. That's not really how it works. A doctor isn't a doctor. There are people who are doctors in specific fields, right? And so I basically was just kind of giving our listeners an introduction into exactly what seasonal depression, also known as seasonal affective disorder, is, just kind of laying a foundation for them as to what it is, what it looks like, and how you might end up diagnosed with it, and that kind of thing. So I'll give you an opportunity to greet our listeners, those who are listening or watching us, and then we can keep going after that.
All right, good evening. Apologies for arriving late. And thank you for giving me the opportunity again to share space with you and speak about seasonal depression. Um, as Therese said, I am no stranger here, but if you're seeing me for the first time, my name is Saran King, and I am a medical doctor, health coach, a mom of 2, and an author as well. And I'm always open to sharing and learning with others.
All right. Awesome. Very good. So I was just talking to the listeners about the fact that seasonal depression is typically a fall and winter thing. And I was just getting ready to say, as you popped on, that there is a very, very small number of people. It's really very rare. But there are people who get seasonal affective disorder in the summer. Have you ever heard of that? It's really rare. And I have been in this profession for a long time, and I never saw it until this year. For the first time ever, I saw a client who has seasonal affective disorder, but she doesn't get it in the wintertime. In the wintertime, she's fine. It's winter is when she's at her best, and she has severe clinical depression, like really severe clinical depression. She has been dealing with clinical depression for like the last decade of her life. She's been on medication. She cannot get off of her medication because it's that severe. But she is at her best in the winter. And one would think that it is when she probably would be most um challenged where it comes to her clinical depression symptoms, but she actually thrives during the winter time, like it is literally her favorite time of the year. Whereas in the summer, ooh, problems. She struggles and struggles and struggles. And so I wanted to quickly add that even though seasonal depression is typically a fall and winter issue, it is rare, but it can happen where you see people dealing with seasonal depression that impacts them in the summer. It's very rare. We call it summer depression, but it's actually a form of seasonal depression. It's just happening during the summer season. And this group of people, this very small, rare group of people, would typically start having those symptoms later in the spring and early summer, and then it fades away by the time fall comes. And during the winter, they're fine, right? And like I said, I never saw it until this year. This year, I saw it for the first time where I literally had a client who was dealing with this. And I was like, this is fascinating. It truly is. But the thing about summer seasonal depression is that it comes with a lot of other implications, meaning that because the clinical depression it's at its peak during the summer months, this person does not deal with the heat very well. This person does not deal with having to wear summer clothes very well. This person doesn't want anybody to see their body. These people also typically have a lot of issues with body dysmorphia, body image issues. They want to wear sweaters during the middle of summer when it is at its when the weather is hottest. It's yeah, so while persons might be tempted to think, oh, I'd actually rather have seasonal depression in the summer than in the winter, it does come with a number of complications that really I can't say one is better than the other. They both come with a number of challenges that one would have to overcome if they're dealing with that. Um, I don't know if you, as a medical professional in the Caribbean, have had to deal with a lot of this. Have you seen any of this? What does that look like?
All right. Personally, I have not dealt with seasonal depression. Normally, if I suspect a person may have clinical depression, I would pass them on to the professional like you, because I'm only a doctor. So I pass them, or I should say, not pass them, I refer them to a psychologist or a
Right,
counselor who would be better able to deal with that. But seasonal depression, as I said, it can occur at any time of the year. It is typically during the winter months, but it can happen in the summer months. It just it's normally accompanied with chronic depression, as you know, is not
right,
normally isolated. And when I was doing my research, some people even doubt if it's real. Seasonal depression is real. There are like conflicting trials that said it is, and some persons say it isn't, but it's not isolated by itself. It is accompanied with other things. But it
right.
just means that it happens at the same time, around the same time every year. So it can happen at any time of the year, as long as it occurs during so it's either winter, fall, or summer, spring, or is it the other way around? Did I
Well,
have it right?
they, well,
Winter,
fall, winter,
fall,
spring,
winter,
summer,
spring, summer, right?
spring. What you they get it. They get it. They get it. Yeah. Um, One of the things I'm really interested in hearing from you is about the specific um, medical background behind clinical depression, because I talk a lot about clinical depression on my platform. That's like a reoccurring theme on this platform because it's a problem. It's a real issue, depression. Um, but there is a medical component, or rather, let me change that word, an organic component behind clinical depression and seasonal affective disorder and any other type of depression that a client wouldn't normally hear about necessarily unless they're going to get some medication. Usually, if they're coming to talk therapy, we just stick to the talk therapy, the psychotherapy aspects of their treatment. And we don't dig into, okay, so you know your brain is producing X and Y, or too much of this or too little of that. And so you have to get this medication. The medication is going to do X and the Y and the Z and that kind of thing. We don't typically dig into. I was hoping that you could speak a little bit about that aspect of the situation today.
All right. So from my research, because I don't have a lot of like physical evidence and personal experience to go off of. So it's normally cause three areas. So there's a psychological component that accompanies seasonal depression. And in this, we have what they call the circadian phase. So your sleeping phase. And basically what it is, the way our brain responds to light and darkness, right? So that's why normally it's more frequent during the winter months, because the fact that we're not getting enough light, it affects our mood, it affects the way hormones are secreted in our bodies, and that's why it's more common during the summer months. It affects our sleep pattern, and it affects the way our body produces hormones. Specifically, some of the happy hormones, which would be serotonin, dopamine, and melatonin. Melatonin, people may have heard of melatonin because they do have medications where people would take it to help them sleep, but their body naturally secretes melatonin as well. And so during the darker days, our body is producing, or secreting less of the dopamine and less of the serotonin, just because of the daylight, amount of daylight and amount of sleep that we are getting in the day. Also, a part of the psychological component, we have right. So I said, yes, retinal sensitivity to light. So the amount of light that goes into our, and just let me know if I'm glitching, because it's glitching on my side. I'm not sure why. Is my video glitching?
I am hearing you. I'm hearing you. I hope you
Okay.
can hear me.
I can hear you, but
Yeah,
my
I'm
on
hearing
my
you.
end, my video is glitchy. I'm not sure why. All right, so we have retinal sensitivity to light, the amount of light that goes into our eyes as well. It affects our brain, it affects the way hormones are secreted. And so that's why part of seasonal depression treatment is light therapy. So actually getting
Mhm.
light, either artificial light, but preferably natural sunlight on the body. Maybe that's why tanning
Right.
is popular during the winter months, where persons can get that sunlight on their body, because it does more than one thing.
Mhm.
It helps to secrete the serotonin and the dopamine because of the actual light that's going on the skin and the amount of light entering the eye, and also the amount of vitamin D that is taken up in the body. Some persons, they may be getting vitamin D, but they're not absorbing it in the intestines as they should. So you may notice that persons who live in areas where it's very cold all of the time, either they have to take vitamin D supplements, or they are deficient in vitamin D because they're just not getting enough vitamin D. Then there's also a controversial genetic component and specific genes that may be linked to seasonal depression. Now, this is very
Huh.
controversial
Yeah.
because of studies that they do, but the same way they you may hear about studies with persons who abuse substances, that there's a genetic component because everybody in the family drinks, or you might hear that somebody may be predisposed to diabetes because everybody in the family are diabetic. It's something similar where, well, everybody suffers from depression in the family, so it kind of runs in the family. So there's nothing concrete to say that there's a specific gene, but there are studies that suggest that there may be a gene that's connected and may make you predisposed to developing seasonal depression. And then there's an environmental factor, just depending on the altitude that you're living. So persons who are living at very high altitudes, they may be predisposed to develop seasonal depression, and persons who live in colder areas. Yeah. So
Okay.
right, so it's right. Fall, winter, summer, spring. Yes, I wrote it down.
Yeah.
With seasons and
Yeah.
time.
Right. We were saying spring, summer.
Right.
That it matters. Those are the months that are impacted. Um, all right. Good. So the big question that people will often ask, after they hear this intro into the topic is, what are the symptoms? I actually compiled a number of symptoms that I personally have seen. As Saran said, she doesn't see a lot of this in the Caribbean, which is where she is. I am on the other side of the globe. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm on the other side of the globe where we do actually see a lot of this. This is a real problem. As a matter of fact, sometimes as therapists, we joke and we say this is when we work hardest. It is during the fall and the winter season when we work hardest as psychotherapists because people are not okay during these dark months of the year, especially in the specific areas of the US that I live and work in, because it is cold for so much of the year. Where I am specifically, the weather begins to get cold at around late October, I would say, and it does not warm up again until March. Yes. Yes, it's that the cold season really is that long up here. I'm very close to the Canadian border. I am about an hour and a half from the Canadian border, so you can, and you know what the weather in Canada is like, so
Yeah.
you can appreciate. Um, we have very similar weather, and so the cold season is very long. A lot of very dark. Um, Days, a lot of snow, and that kind of thing. And so it truly is a period of time when we are bombarded with persons who are just not doing well at this time of year. And so I compiled a list of symptoms that we see that are very typical for persons who are dealing with clinical depression and seasonal affective disorder at this time of year. And of course, the list has to start with the typical depressive symptoms. The person is going to complain of feeling sad all the time, feeling sad, feeling, sad most of the day, depressed most of the day. Some persons will come in and say that they feel that way every day. And that they have been feeling that way for a long period of time. We want to see a person have a minimum of 14 days of consistent symptoms before we can give an official diagnosis. And so by the time people come in, they would normally have been feeling like this for weeks sometimes and thinking that it will just subside. Many times persons are just thinking it's just a passing thing and they will be fine. And the next thing you know, a month goes by and they're not feeling any better and they realize, okay, something is wrong here. Um, we also see a lot of anxiety accompanying that because people are trying to figure out what is wrong with me. Why am I suddenly feeling like this? And so then you start having anxiety symptoms as well. And so we would see that. And then we see a lot of this is a symptom nobody likes, but it tends to accompany seasonal depression every time. And that is craving for carbohydrates. It's a, yeah, people just want to eat a lot of carbs. A lot of emotional eating goes on when you have seasonal depression. I don't know for sure if it has to do with the fact that it's the time of year when there's a lot of carbs to eat and so you crave them, or if it's just that the carbs, which eventually convert into sugar in your system, somehow help to counteract what the lethargy that you are feeling, so that it can give you a little push to get through your day. But a lot of carbohydrate cravings, and so as a result, a lot of weight gain, which, who wants that? Nobody wants that, except for people except for people who really need it. You know, and then of course the extreme fatigue, a lot of lethargy, extreme fatigue, and just a lack of energy. And this does not come from necessarily physical exhaustion. So you are not lethargic and fatigued because you've been working hard all day. Like you wake up in the morning and you're already exhausted. So it's not a physical exhaustion, it's more of a mental exhaustion that you have, where you just feel exhausted even though you have not been doing anything at all. It's like an unexplainable exhaustion that typically goes along with it. And then there are the emotional aspects of it that are also very common. People feel a lot of hopelessness, like life isn't worth it, all complaints about worthlessness. No, I don't, I feel pointless, I feel like my life has no point or purpose to it. um People would have trouble concentrating because they spend a lot of time ruminating and thinking a lot of negative thoughts. And so it's difficult to concentrate. They complain of a lack of productivity, not being able to get their work or their schoolwork done, and these types of things. Very easily irritated, easily agitated. Everything gets them upset. Everything is annoying. Everybody is annoying. They don't like anything or anybody. um, I've had persons who complain about their limbs feeling heavy. I don't know what that is about. Maybe you, as the medical doctor, can tell me what that's about. But I've had people complaining about like their arms or legs just feel heavy. Their extremities in general just feel heavy, and that walking around it feels like a chore, and they're tired when they have to walk anywhere, even if it's just from one end of the house to the other. They just don't want to move, and so they spend hours or all day in bed just not doing anything. um, Also, there's a loss of interest in pleasurable activities or things that they typically would enjoy. They don't like doing any of that anymore, and so you would be very withdrawn, very antisocial, don't want to go anywhere or see anybody, spending a great deal of time sleeping, like they will sleep all day and then also sleep all night. As long as it's dark, they're sleeping. And sometimes, because most of the day is dark, they just, and they're not, like I said, they're not sleeping because they're physically exhausted, because they haven't done anything. It's a fatigue that is mental, and they're just sleeping and sleeping and sleeping some more. In very severe cases, we will also see persons who are having suicidal ideations, um, and maybe even suicide attempts as well, if it gets to that point, right? But those, of course, are very severe cases, which we try to avoid. We try to see if we can make sure it does not get to that point where people start having these suicidal ideations and suicide attempts. Um, but this in general, is what you would see. This is the group of symptoms that you would typically see for persons who are complaining of seasonal affective disorder. And I would say that these symptoms kind of, to some extent, to a large extent, mirror the same mood changes that you would see in somebody with general clinical depression at any time of the year. But let's jump back to the heavy limbs. Do you know anything about that? What's that about?
I guess that's in connection with feeling depressed, feeling down, feeling sad, and so it manifests in your body as just feeling that weight. So that
Hmm.
emotional weight probably transcends to
Yeah.
physical weight and physical exhaustion. I wanted to interject here where you mentioned about sleeping all day, sleeping all night, feeling tired, and wanting to eat carbs. And I did see that that would be for the fall, winter
Yeah.
seasonal
Yeah.
affective disorder. But for the spring, summer, it says that there's loss of appetite and insomnia is included as well. But as mentioned, it's normally accompanied with clinical depression. It's not like isolated by itself.
Right. Yeah. 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 And the insomnia in the summer version of it makes sense, particularly on this side of the world too,
Yes. Yeah.
because the exact opposite
It's
happens
happening
where the days, instead of being shorter, become very
long.
long. And at 10 p.m., the sun is still high outside. Like it literally still looks like it's 3 o'clock
Day.
in the afternoon and it's 10 o'clock at night. If you want to get to bed early during that time of the year, you have to have super dark curtains and drapes in your windows that you can draw so that it looks like it's nighttime inside your house, even though the sun is still high outside. It's crazy. It really is. But that will certainly induce insomnia because you're wide awake due to the fact that there is sunlight outside and you don't realize it's 10 o'clock at night because you don't feel sleepy or tired. The human brain is a thing.
Remarkable. It's
Remarkable, really.
yep.
Right. And so that absolutely makes sense. If you're dealing with seasonal affective disorder that shows up in the summertime, it would certainly make sense that instead of wanting to sleep constantly, you don't want to sleep at all. Which of course is is just as detrimental. You don't want to sleep too
It's
much,
just right, right.
but you
You
also don't want to not sleep at all because that also has its consequences. Um, I want to talk a little bit about vitamin D deficiency, and the serotonin levels and how what that looks like. Um, I know that sunlight is supposed to be um, it's supposed to facilitate the production of vitamin D, and that less sun means less vitamin D. What exactly is the connection between the sunlight and vitamin D production? And can people just produce vitamin D by standing outside in the sun? Like you just go and stand in the sun and your skin just produces vitamin D? How does that work?
all right. So the body does not directly produce vitamin D, but when it's exposed to the sunlight, there is a process that happens so it converts into vitamin D. And vitamin D is important for your bones, your muscles, your joints, your tissues, and your overall bone health. So just
Mhm.
imagine not getting sufficient vitamin D, you're going to have problems with your bones. I don't know if this is in connection with feeling that weight. I don't know. You're going to have problems with your muscles. Maybe that's the connection. I'm not sure for sure. Um, you know, as you said, the body
May
is very
very well be.
remarkable.
Yeah, the human
That
brain
could
is.
probably be the because normally persons who are in colder areas they do have vitamin D deficiency. So I don't know for sure if that is the connection, but if I'm
Mhm.
thinking maybe that may be part of the reason why persons are feeling lethargic because if it's affecting your muscles, the muscle tone is probably decreased. If it's affecting your joints and your tissues, then it's there's going to be some negative effects there. So
Right.
that could be the
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. I think also, in addition to that, I think people, really underestimate the importance of having a stable body clock.
Yeah.
Um, Usually, when I see clients who are dealing with seasonal depression, they have issues with their biological body clock. And that is typically the first thing that we try to tackle. Let's see if we can stabilize the body clock. Like you need to start waking up at the same time every day, going to bed at the same time every day. No matter how you feel, set an alarm and get up at the same time every day, because there is some very intricate connection between the body clock and your emotions and how you feel. And I believe this is what you were speaking to when you mentioned the circadian
Phase. Yeah.
rhythm earlier, when you were talking. I can't say that I know a lot about the circadian rhythm, but I imagine that it is the reason why, if we do not help a client to stabilize their body clock, they do not manage ever to beat seasonal depression. Like that is typically the first thing that they have to get done. And unless they get that done, it is always an uphill battle constantly. Um, because there is something about that body clock and the shift that it makes at that time of the year that immediately begins to hit them emotionally. I don't know if we have all of the answers for all of these questions, but this is definitely something that I have observed. Regulating the internal clock somehow translates to regulating their mood. It is a thing that I have seen, and so I
And
am
it also, sorry, I wanted to interject here. It also affects your endocrine system. So you find persons who, as you said, the body clock is off. They are at
Mhm.
higher risk for getting things like thyroid issues, diabetes. Uh, yeah, so they have studies. Don't take my word for it. You can research it. The persons who work like the graveyard shift, that midnight 8 o'clock shift, they're at higher risk for developing diabetes, because our body, human beings, we were designed to be sleeping when it's dark and to be up when it's light. So now you've turned your clock, internal clock, upside down by being up in the night and then sleeping during the day. So it throws off some of your hormones, and you can develop endocrine problems as well.
Wow. So what does that say about doctors like you who always have to work the graveyard shift?
Well, we have a lot of healthcare providers who suffer in silence, one, with depression, with substance abuse, with suicidal thoughts because of the same circadian rhythm being off, working extreme hours or working at odd hours of the day.
Mhm.
And of course, there's a stigma attached to healthcare providers seeking attention, going to seek medical or psychological attention
Right.
because, well, you're a healthcare provider, you should know what to do. Um, you
Hmm.
probably do know what to do, but it doesn't mean that you suffer any less.
Right. Right.
uh, and
Yeah.
and persons who work very long hours, so like pilots, persons, surgeons, they are at higher risk for substance abuse, for different things, high blood pressure. If you can just ask around in your circle, persons, healthcare providers, a lot of them suffer from high blood pressure, diabetes, um, some hormonal issue if it's not thyroid, something to do with their, even with their menstrual cycle. For women, they have problems, but you know you won't hear about it like blasting on the news because you are a healthcare providers. People come to you for help, and so for
Right.
you to admit that, okay, you have a substance abuse problem. And I find from my personal experience being in the field, addiction field, substance abuse, healthcare providers are the most challenging patients, especially therapists.
No way, really?
Especially the therapists, because
Why do you
they
say
know
that?
what to do in theory. They've advised their clients, and then they find themselves in the same situation because they have challenges just like their clients. And when we put our work ahead of our health, then we fall into the trap of having depression. There are a lot of healthcare providers who suffer with depression and have
Mhm.
substance abuse issues. We have a lot of people in our society who we would consider highly functioning addicts. So they can drink all night, they depend on a substance, and then they're able to work. A lot of surgeons, especially because they might work really long hours having a surgery, pilots, doctors, therapists, healthcare provider, first responders. Let me mostly first responders. They are at very high risk for, you know, all the things that I mentioned. And I remember meeting a lady from Canada, wherever she was a first responder, a paramedic, and the area where she lives, it snows year round, and so the depression rate is very high. The suicide attempt rate is very high as well because it's never warm. Wherever somewhere at the peak close to the North Pole, she said it's always snowing. It's cold year round, just like we are hot year round, they're cold year round. And so the the percentage of depression is very high.
Mm.
I don't know if you can call that seasonal depression if you're in the cold all the time.
Um, Perhaps there we might have to come up with a name for it. It's some it's there
It's
it's some
depression.
it's some specific, some special kind of clinical depression. I'm not sure what we would have to term that because it's it is mimicking seasonal depression, and it's being caused by the same things that cause seasonal depression as well, but it's year round. I don't know what we would call that. Extended, prolonged, or protracted seasonal depression.
I have no
Perhaps
idea.
that is what we might have to call it.
And the
Right.
same lady that I met, she said the suicide rate is very high in that area because it's always cold. Like, I mean, when you're where you are, at least it gets warm at some point, and you kind of the symptoms might subside, and then when it gets cold again, it flares up. But imagine it, you never get a break. You
Yeah.
never get a break.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Let's talk a little bit about how seasonal affective disorder is treated. So I just mentioned helping people to kind of regulate their body clock and how important that is. But that is not the only thing, of course. Um, I typically use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a type of talk therapy. And research has shown, not just research, but our practice has shown that it's very effective in treating not just seasonal affective disorder, but any other type of depression, and helping persons to learn to manage symptoms and reduce the impact on their lives. And so, talk therapy, yes, is very helpful, but it's certainly not the only thing in treating seasonal depression, because seasonal depression is a very specific type of depression. And so, we also have to try to get the clients to make some lifestyle changes, like lifestyle modification has to be combined with talk therapy if you're going to truly be able to manage seasonal depression. So it can't just be coming into the office and sitting down and talking to me, and we do some cognitive behavioral therapy and you think that that's it and you'll be fine. Not with this type of depression. With this type of depression, you have to combine that with lifestyle change. Modification of your lifestyle is a must. Starting with, like I said, working on getting that circadian rhythm back to where it's supposed to be. You mentioned earlier light therapy, very important. And I think we've already kind of expounded on why the light is important in this type of depression. Um, and so if you can get the sunlight, well, of course, that would be the best type of light to get. But if you don't have access to that, um, there is actually what we call bright light therapy, where you actually get a special type of lamp. Like there are lamps that are designed specifically for bright light therapy use. And you get one of those lamps and you actually have to sit, or we advise that you sit by that lamp for certain periods of time per day, so that it can kind of mimic the impact that some sunlight would have on you, and kind of pushing your brain or your body to produce those chemicals that you need in order to get your mood regulated. It it sounds a little strange, but it actually works.
Well, it's actually not strange because we use it in medicine as well with premature
Oh yeah.
babies. So
Oh
persons
yes,
or
the
babies who have
incubators.
jaundice, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So they will put them on the same bright light. I believe is the same UV light that they would to protect
Yes.
the eyes, and they remove all the clothes of the baby. So this specifically for babies who have jaundice, and who may not be able to, there may be an incubator, they may be connected to different cords, they may have in a tube in their throat, they may have IV line, and so you can't take them, outside. And so they put a bright light in the incubator, and they
Mm-hmm.
would give them a certain amount of sunlight ever so often, and turning them like a pancake to make sure they get front and back to expose the body to the light to help to reduce the jaundice. So you may hear when mothers have their child, oh, you have to give the baby sunlight. So it's basically the same thing to kind of produce the vitamin
Yeah.
D,
Yeah.
to expose the body to the light, so that the child doesn't get jaundice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like artificial sunlight.
Yes, yes, it is artificial sunlight. Yes.
Yeah, it's
So
like artificial sunlight. Yeah. We also typically recommend, and you mentioned this as well, for our clients who have seasonal depression, we always recommend that they get on vitamin D supplements immediately. And you mentioned that, and you explained why the vitamin D is important. Um, if they can, we want them to spend time outdoors. But for most persons, spending time outdoors really is not. Um, and spending time outdoors during the daylight hours, or whatever little bit of sunlight they can get during the winter time, for many persons it's just not feasible, because it may be during the time when they are at work and indoors. For example, I have a client who has seasonal depression, who has to leave home to get to work, and is leaving home very early in the morning before there is daylight. It's still dark out when she goes to work. She goes into the building and she's in the building until 5 p.m. And when she leaves at 5 p.m. to go back home, it's dark outside again. So she sees no sunlight. She sees no daylight, sometimes for days at a time, except maybe on Saturday or Sunday. Yeah, because she works inside a building, right? Where she's like in the heart of the building, not like sitting next to a
mhm.
window or something. So whatever is happening outside, she does not see. And if she's leaving work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's dark by 4, well, imagine what her life is like from Monday to Friday, right?
Just
Yeah.
thinking about that makes me sad.
Yes, and the sun, you're not actually seeing any real sunlight until about 7 in the morning at this time of year, more or less. And she is leaving home to go to work at like 6 in the morning. It's still dark outside, so she sees no sunlight for
Oh,
days at a time, and it begins to take a toll on her. Um, And so I say all of that to say that sometimes telling a client, you need to spend time outdoors. You need to try to get a little sunlight. Sometimes, telling them that that is what they need to do in order to improve their symptoms is really counterproductive because you're asking them to do something that they really have no way to do it. It's just not feasible because of the life that people live. Um, you know, um, but if you can, yeah, we tell you to get outside. Definitely go outside and increase the amount of sunlight that is hitting your skin. Absolutely. It's just that for most persons at this time of the year, it's just not feasible. And so typically we go with the light therapy, the artificial sunlight. Get yourself one of those lamps and, and sit next to it. Bring it to work with you and put it on your desk. And and it's if that is what you have to do, that is what you have to do. And then of course there are really, really severe cases where we have to, and by we I mean us, the psychotherapist, because we do not prescribe medication, right? I just want to put that out there. I don't prescribe meds, people. Right? I don't write prescriptions. Let's just put that out there. If I conclude that you need prescription medication, then I'm going to send you over to Saran, right? And Saran will write you the prescription. I don't write prescriptions. She does. So if I send a very, very severe case of seasonal depression to you, and I tell you, this is the person's file, these are their symptoms, they are clearly very severely depressed, and I think this person needs more than just talk therapy and light therapy. This person needs to be medicated, perhaps put on some type of antidepressant or whatever other type of psychotropic medication. What would you prescribe for such a client?
Oh, well, I never had one of those clients. But sometimes, antidepressants and pharmacotherapy is necessary. I'm not a person who prescribe a lot of medication. If I think that someone needs to be on some pharmacotherapy for depression, I probably would refer them to a psychiatrist
Hmm.
who would be best able to do that, because I don't keep psychotropic medications in my office. The only thing I would have is painkillers and, and some pregnancy tests. Uh, but there are times where medication is necessary, and as I tell people all of the time, it doesn't mean that you have to be on it until you die. It doesn't mean that you have to be on it forever. And even if you have to be on it, I always advocate for trying to wean off or to be on as little medication as possible. There are times where it's not possible. It just depends on how severe the case is, how long the person has had their symptoms, and all of that. I'm not against medication, but it has its role, and sometimes you it helps. It helps. I had a client who I suggested that she should take some anti-anxiety medication, and she was strongly against. Oh, I don't want to take anything else. I don't want to take it. And 2 days later, she's like, I need something. And she called me back, and I said, okay, are you open to trying this? And the next day, she's like, I don't know what this is, but it works. It helped. There are times where we might be against having to take something, because especially when it comes to psychotropic medications,
Hmm.
anytime you even suggest someone going to a
Oh, I know.
psychiatrist or even a psychologist or even just you know somebody who is in the social worker department, they think that, oh, you think I'm crazy. And it's not about being crazy, it's about trying to prevent you from going crazy, and just helping you the same way you might have to, take something for a cleanse for your body. You may have to take something have to take something for your mental health, because your mental health form part of your complete health.
Right.
And so we can't be totally closed minded when it comes to certain things. We have to be open to trying things. It may not be forever. It may just be for a period of time, and then you can try other things. And it's never one thing. It's never one thing to treat anything. It's usually a series of things. So you have
Right.
your cognitive behavioral therapy, you have your bright light therapy, your lifestyle changes. You may even have to change location if it's not working out for you. You may have to change careers. I know someone who went from being a teacher into selling oils, essential oils, because being around children was triggering her and causing anxiety, and she didn't know. It took her 14 years to recognize that it's triggering for her. And so she had to switch careers. My mother was a trained nurse and midwife, and she had to transition into being a trained teacher because she was just getting sick all of the time, and she had a slip disc, and she had this and she had that, and she decided to switch careers. It's okay. It doesn't mean that you're abandoning your career, or you can still practice something that you love in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Final question of the day. Ian says you should recommend an Antigua Barbuda vacation for her this time of year. If only it was that easy. It costs a lot of money to travel to Antigua. I don't know if she can afford it, but I'll make the recommendation. Why not? Um, but the final thing I would want to touch on today, very last thing, is um, like things people can do to prevent seasonal depression. Like, what can I do to ensure that this does not happen to me? Because it could happen to anybody. I know that people like to walk around thinking that they are somehow immune to certain disorders.
Mhm.
Um, you know, this can happen to anyone. And so I would want, before we close out, to talk a little bit about what you can do to take care of yourself. Because, as the old folks say, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure.
Definitely.
And so, how can we take steps to look after ourselves to prevent an episode of seasonal depression? Um, and I think we've kind of already given several tips. We've spoken about the importance of sunlight. If you have access to sunlight, please use it. Take it. If you can get outside every day and get a little sunlight on your skin, please do so, now that you realize how much it impacts your overall health. Not just your physical, but your mental health as well is impacted by how much light you are getting and seeing with your eyes every day. And so get some sunlight on your skin if you can. Take advantage of it. Go outside. And I'm talking to myself. I have to turn my finger in there. Go outside, Therese.
You're not getting enough sunlight.
Go outside, girl. Listen, I struggle with going outside. Do you hear me? I struggle.
Really?
Yes. Oh my
Is it
goodness.
because you work from home?
I work from home.
Yeah.
I work from home, and I have,
Put it on your schedule, like you put your client who has an appointment. You put an alarm and
I
10
when
minutes.
I
10
get a,
minutes.
I go into my office, and my office is at home. I have a home office, and I go into my office and I spend the entire day in there, and then I leave my office and I go to bed.
You don't give yourself a lunch break. So during your
And I
lunch
get
break,
up the next day and I do it again. I eat at in my office. I go to the kitchen, I get my meal, I bring it into my office, and I sit here at my desk and I eat. I do everything here at my desk.
You need some
And
more
then
sunlight.
the day comes when I actually have to get outside. I have to go outside because I have to go downtown to run errands or something. Listen, it is traumatic for me. I don't want to go outside. Help me, Saran. Help me. I don't want to go outside. It's so
Open
bad.
the door and walk outside.
I don't want to go outside anymore. Let me tell you, it's the pandemic that did this to me. It's the
Yeah, I know people like that. They get
oh,
anxiety just thinking about having to go outside.
listen, thinking about the process to prepare to go outside is a whole thing for me. I have to think, oh my goodness. First of especially at this time of the year, especially at this time of year where I have to put on 3 layers of
Yeah,
clothing
yeah.
and the boots and the jackets and the hat and the scarf and the gloves and the da. Oh, and then, oh my word, it's a lot. And if it's snowing, worse. I don't know. Going outside is just not my thing anymore. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to go
So
outside.
you have. So I hope you're following your recommendations with your bright light inside.
I what I do is I open my windows and I try to sit near to the window so that I get light through the window on me. I don't know if that is enough. Maybe I should
Are you
probably
doing that every day?
well, most days.
That sounds like
Most
a.
days. Most days. I sometimes try to sit in the kitchen instead of sitting in my office, and I have placed the table in my kitchen right next to the window so that when I'm sitting there, like I'm here and the window is literally right next to me. And so that I'm getting light from the window, and I hope that does something. I don't know. I don't like to go outside. I do not like to go outside. I have a problem. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to work on it. But I'm telling everybody else, go outside.
Well, I love to be outside. I love to be
I
outside.
know you love
Yeah.
outside. I know this. I know this. I
And well,
am
I don't have the challenges that you have because when I visited my friend in New York in 2019, it was the same thing, just to wrap my mind around all the things that I have to put on.
to get up and
And
go. Right. It's
yeah,
a
it
whole
was
thing.
too much for me.
It's too
It was too much.
much. Oh, I don't like it.
And I
No,
was
no,
only
no.
there for what, like 10 days or not even that much. I think I was there for like maybe a week. A week. I think it was. I'm pretty sure I had seasonal depression
In one
during
week?
that in 1 week. I'm sure.
No, sir. No, Saran.
1 week is not enough to
No,
diagnose.
no, we cannot give you a diagnosis of seasonal depression in 1 week. No, ma'am.
Sound
That's a
feasible
no.
to
You
me.
need to have those symptoms at least 14 days, and
I
you need to
wasn't there
have
long
it
enough.
every year for at least 2 years, minimum of 2 years.
That's why I'm in the area where it's hot every day. I have to have the sun on my skin every day. I
Yeah,
have to.
yeah. No, it's rough out here in this cold
It's a
area.
lot. Yeah,
So
it's a lot.
it's a lot. So I have, and I realize it's a problem. Me not wanting to go outside. I know. I just spending time outside for me has become a challenge. That and it's a crazy thing just to hear myself say. But I do not like to go outside anymore. I just don't. And I've been like this since like 2020. This is terrible. I'm going to work on this. I have to work on this. This is a problem. But here's another thing. Moving on, eat a well balanced diet. This is another recommendation that I make for persons who are wondering how they can ward off depression at this time of the year. Um, eat well. Eat well. Because as we said, during seasonal depression, people are craving carbs, constantly craving starchy, sweet foods all the time. And so being intentional about eating a well balanced diet is helpful. Even though you're craving things that you know you should not be eating that much of, try to exercise some control, try to exercise some discipline, and maintain a well balanced diet, because that helps. A healthy diet, make sure you're getting your vitamins and your minerals. Um, that actually, I think, help to boost your energy. It helps
Yeah.
to boost your energy.
Sometimes, sometimes the cravings are linked to lack of nutrients and
Right.
vitamins in the diet.
Mm-hmm.
And we just think, oh, I just feel for sweet, but maybe we don't have enough vitamin D, some of the B complex vitamins, mm,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes it's the micronutrients, not the macro ones, the ones that like zinc and magnesium are those two vitamins that are recommended when persons are depressed as well.
Right. Yeah.
And B B vitamins is very
Yeah.
important.
So, yeah, try to maintain a well balanced diet. Try to get a little exercise as well. All of these are things I personally need to work on. Um, the well balanced diet part, Saran.
And it doesn't mean balancing a pizza on your hand.
No, no, you mean that's not what it means? I thought that's what it meant. What?
Lots of fruits, lots of veggies. And for me, one thing I tell people, persons, especially if they don't like vegetables and they don't like fruits, is to make a smoothie. It's way easier for you to drink your vegetables and your fruits than to sit down with a salad. I personally, I don't mind eating a salad, but it would take me a longer time to sit down with a plate of lettuce, which is not one of my favorite. I eat it, but it's not my favorite. Kale, I'm not gonna sit down and eat kale. Definitely not. I would rather blend it or juice it with
Right.
fruits and just drink that down. So
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you don't like fruits, you can't stand seeing a bunch of greens. You can put it in your food. You can put it in your smoothie, blend it, drink it quickly, and you get those vitamins, especially those green leafy vitamins. Very important.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Got you. Exercise. Try to get some exercise. The experts, like Saran, say that you're supposed to get at least 30 minutes of exercise, 20 to 30 minutes of exercise at least 3 times a week. I know for a fact that exercise is very good for anxiety and depression because of the hormones that your body releases when you exercise.
Yeah.
And so I know this to be
Specifically cardiovascular exercises,
right.
exercises that get your heart rate up. It helps to release what we call happy hormones. So your serotonin, your oxytocin, your adrenaline, all of these hormones are secreted and helps to boost your mood.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you mental clarity as well and helps with anxiety. So when these hormones are secreted, it helps to change the way you feel. So if you're feeling like really mad or really sad, you go for a run, go for a jog. If you have a boxing thing in your house, you
Mm-hmm.
can do that. Get your heart rate up. It could just be walking up and down some steps to get your
Right.
heart rate up,
Yeah.
because that's more effective than just walking on the flat. You could just go up and down, get your heart rate up. It boosts your mood. It's not going to happen like instantly, but it does after a while. And um, studies say that it can be just as effective as taking an antidepressant. Again, I'm not against antidepressants, but it has the similar effect of boosting your mood.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why is um, it is said to be almost like an antidepressant.
So let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
Asking for a friend.
You
I'm asking for
asking?
a friend. What if this person doesn't want to go outside and the person just wants to exercise indoors.
Indoor exercising is perfect, and
Does
you
it
don't
work?
need a lot of space. People think that you
Okay,
need to go
good,
to the
good.
gym. They think you have to get away from your children. Yeah, want to get away from, it's nice if you can do all of that, but you exercise at home. You put on a YouTube video. There are literally hundreds
Thousands.
of thousands of videos on YouTube that you can, if you have bad knees, you pull up a video on that. People with bad knees. If you are a beginner, yoga for children, exercises you can do on your bed, exercises you
Literally
can do when you're
anything.
sitting. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Literally anything. Literally
Anything,
anything. Yeah.
anything. And even though it says 20 to 30 minutes 3 times a day, we know that sometimes this is not possible for persons, just depending on how you're working, your responsibilities. I get all of that. And I always say at least 10 minutes. Start with 10 minutes because it's better than doing nothing. It's just a matter of getting your body moving. It helps with your joints to get the blood circulating, reduce your risk of getting blood clots, reduce your cardiovascular risk, get problems with your heart, problems with circulation. Because I like to say anything that's stagnant stinks. So if your blood is not moving, then you are at risk for developing clots. You're at risk for having problems, and especially if it's for a prolonged period. So it's more effective for you to exercise once or twice a week for 10-15 minutes than to go to the gym every day for 10 days and then do nothing for 10 months. So just having a routine, being consistent. Sometimes you just need to stretch. You just need to stretch to keep your body flexible, just to keep your joints lubricated. And if that's all you can manage, just get up and stretch for 2 minutes. Stretch and, just get your body moving. That is
Right.
the goal here, to get your body moving.
Yeah. Yeah. The last thing that I would add to the list, and we're talking about ways that you can prevent seasonal depression. Last thing I would throw in here is to not isolate yourself. This is a problem also for people who deal with depression, is that the tendency is to isolate, and it makes bad matters worse always. And so try not to isolate yourself. I think this is also helpful if you do not have seasonal depression and you're trying to avoid it. You don't have to wait until something happens to start taking preemptive measures. Take the preemptive measures now and practice getting out and spending time with people, with your friends and your loved ones, especially coming out of a pandemic. I know a lot of people, like myself, have grown so accustomed to being inside alone, and it is a habit now that has become difficult to break. And so people invite you out, and you're literally sitting down trying to think of what excuse you can come up with
That's
to
me.
not go, to not go, because you don't really have any excuse, but you're trying to think of one. Because
I have a Zoom meeting.
I have a meeting. I have I have I have a client. I just don't want to go outside. Why are you inviting me out? Right? No, literally, it's bad, but it's all
I like
right.
to be outside, but I don't necessarily want to be with people.
So I thought I was bad, but
I like to be
yeah,
alone.
yeah, but having a nice support network around you is very helpful for people who are dealing with depression of any kind, for that matter. Isolating yourself is never a good thing if you are trying to avoid depression or you're trying to come out of depression. It is when people are most likely to want to isolate, but it is also probably the most counterproductive thing to do. You're actually
Mm.
making your situation worse rather than better. So
Yeah.
push yourself to, I'm saying it that way because it's literally a push. It's a push. Push yourself to stay involved in your social circle, attend some
And I think
activities.
this goes for any type of depression, including postpartum depression. Not isolating
Yeah.
yourself.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's why, like suicide rate, the depression rate, the substance abuse rate went up during the pandemic, because we're telling our addicts don't isolate, and then everybody
And everybody's on lockdown.
everybody was forced to isolate, and so you saw that spike during the pandemic with substance
Yes.
abuse, people relapsing, depression, suicide. It was, really terrible,
Yeah.
and so
I
isolating.
see we have a question here. I can Lee is asking, would introverts be high risk for seasonal affective disorder?
Well, I don't know, and I never researched it, but I think people have this misconception that introverts just want to be home all day and they don't have any friends. Even though, yes, because I'm an introvert, although people would think I'm not, but I am an introvert. Um, introverts
I
like to be
also
around
consider
people too.
myself an introvert.
Yeah. Introverts like to be around people too. It's not that we don't like to be
Mhm.
around people.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like from the perspective of a psychologist, I am going to say no to that question. I don't think so. I think anybody is susceptible to having seasonal affective disorder or any other type of depression. And I agree with what Saran said. Also, introverts are not necessarily people who just want to spend all of their time alone. I think introverts are people who need time alone in order to better be around other people. We
Yeah,
do like to be around other people, we just can't keep doing it endlessly without having some time to
great.
recharge
Yeah,
alone.
yeah.
I consider myself an introvert too. After having done a certain amount of peopling, I have to, yes,
That's perfect.
in order to keep peopling some more, I have got to take some time alone
To
and recharge my
recharge.
battery. It's like I have to go to the station and plug in and bring the battery back up to full, like you have to do with your
Yeah.
cell phone, in order to go back and be around some people some more. I need time by myself. It is critical. And in like, what I do, Saran. I am constantly
More
peopling. Constantly.
people in.
I just made up that, right? That's not a word. But peopling, as in being with people. It is my life. I am constantly making a presentation here, talking on a station there, seeing clients here. It is my life, literally.
Yeah.
And
And
so
I like interacting with people though. I love
I
interacting with
also
people.
I love
Yeah.
it. I enjoy what we're doing here right now. I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoy this.
Yeah.
But
And
I
I actually
also
prefer
thoroughly enjoy
I
being alone
actually
sometimes.
I actually prefer in-person interactions, because you can sense different things from persons. You
Yes.
can read their body language a little better. You
Energy is
can,
different.
right. I had a client, because I was looking deeply into her eyes, I guess, according to her, and she's like, "Why are you looking at me?" I was like, "But I'm talking to you." Because I have to look at you. I'm not sure what you want me to do. And she's like, "It's so uncomfortable." I said, "But you don't look at people when you talk to them." Uh, I found it kind of weird, but anyway, we're
Oh,
all weird in our own ways.
yeah. On that note, I feel like we should not continue that discussion. On that note, I think we should wrap up this broadcast. Thank you so much for being here with me, Saran. Thank you for taking the time out of your Sunday to be here to have this conversation. Thank you also to all the persons who have interacted with us in the chat section here today, and to all our silent viewers. Those of you who are watching but are not saying anything, we see you. Thank you for being here as well. And also, let me give a greeting to the persons who are going to watch this recording later on. Those who are not watching us in 2022 and maybe watching us in 2023 and at some other time in the future, thank you as well for being here and supporting the Always the Queen, the Metamorphosis platform. And on that note, we're going to wrap up today's broadcast. I leave you with love and light as usual. And remember to be a beautiful week. Bye, everybody.